Chapter 9, Integrity Under Fire. Thursday, 9:40 p.m. The Marble Square. The night was dark, and the rain fell as steady as ever. The moon had escaped behind a dense cloud, and thunder could be heard in the distance. In a move to solve their dilemma, some residents were talking about different solutions, despite the fact that some of them had not gotten much sleep.
We need a source of help which is beyond our power,
Resident Resolve said during a heated discussion.
Once you understand the king better, then gratitude and love, not worry of obligatory rules, will be what will motivate you. When he has changed you, then what were once only rules to you will become love letters. He will give you the power and desire to live up to what he has shown you are right, and what were once rules will become a joy for you to fulfill.
But that is just the point,
Charged Resident Rye, who was standing next to the fountain.
You are just presuming on the benevolence of the king, and you expect us to do the same. It's too great a risk, and it's too much to ask.
Yeah,
Rejoined Resident Averse, shielding his eyes from the rain.
there is no way for us to know the character of the king. How would we even know that he would be nice at all? All we really know is that his protection would be blackmail for our obeying his boring rules.
First of all, that blackmail comment is pure speculation. If you would read the plaques, then they will set you straight regarding the king.
More presuming.
Fumed Resident Candid, rubbing his hands together.
There is no way for you to know if those plaques are fairy tales or not. That is your problem, Resolve. You would believe anything without any good reasons, and you expect the rest of us to act in the same harebrained way. If you want us to take you seriously, we need to have evidence. Hard proof for why you believe, and not based on your word or some old sheets of metal from who knows when or where.
Candid,
Resident Resolve replied.
you know just as well as I do that those plaques have been in the Great Tower longer than you or I, or even Head Inspector Cautious, have been alive.
Resolve, you have no way to even prove where they came from. You don't even know how old they are. You have no evidence that the jargon in those stories on those silver plaques is even true.
The plaques may not seem like much evidence, and you consider them a poor excuse for believing in the king. But you have no plaques which prove that the king does not exist. Theories perhaps, but not hard facts. You have no way to prove that the plaques are made up or phony at all, especially since you have no established or contradictory alternative to their historical record.
Well, perhaps,
Replied Resident Candid.
but that was not the direct point. What I meant was that we cannot rely on the plaques to give us accurate information on the king or the nature of his occupation of this castle once he liberated us.
Resident Candid finished as he rubbed his hands together.
That makes sense.
Commented Resident Averse.
I think it's unwise to jump to conclusions regarding the king, since it would be tricky to know just how miserable we would be were he to rescue us. I think it would not be a bad idea to let that jovial group outside in this castle, but since some of you insist on using your brains instead of your eyes, the best option is to rely on the walls to keep that harmless force out there.
You may still hear a tap, tap, but I still hear a bam, bam.
Resident Resolve replied.
True, Resolve, and even though we hear a tap-tap, the tap-tap we hear does not explain how the wall is showing signs of getting weaker.
Resident Leary replied, between biting his fingernails.
Our friend Leary here is right. Maybe the wall is not as strong as we thought, but it is certainly strong enough to keep that force outside at bay. And as such, we should rely on the wall.
Commented Resident Averse.
Well, Averse, the only other option that argument leaves us, as opposed to rejecting the king because we won't trust him, is eventual defeat or surrender to the enemy.
Resident Resolve replied.
Surrender is such a strong word, Resolve.
Replied Resident Averse as he fidgeted.
And you were just taking it for granted that a force like that outside the wall could break through our walls and defenses? How could they do such a thing? Even if they did have weapons, this wall is too strong. What is wrong with you, Averse?
Is it just me, or did the temperature drop in this castle?
What does that have to do with anything of us?
Questioned Resident Rye.
It must have started out very weak, but I do believe there is a breeze in this castle now. I'm not cold, but there's a pleasant breeze about.
Resident Resolve replied. Resident Averse began to shiver a little while pulling his cloak closer to him.
To get back to the point, have you seen Rye that around the Gate of Hearing there are particles of stone from the wall that are tumbling out in disturbingly increased numbers?
Yes, Resolve, but that is no assurance it is done for,
replied Resident Rye.
I understand Rye, but frankly, it makes me feel uneasy.
If there was an army outside the wall, which there is not, can you really be so sure that giving in and placating Pernicious would not be beneficial to us rather than being defeated and miserable because we withstood him to the last?
Resident Averse questioned.
That suggestion is a slam to our integrity.
Is integrity really so important during a time like this, Resolve?
Questioned Resident Candid.
It is integrity at times like this, with an attack of temptation against Finite Castle, that is at the very heart of the matter. It is integrity that is at stake, and it would be integrity that we are fighting for. You all surely know that Pernicious is disgusted and enraged by integrity.
Are you suggesting that integrity is more important than the quality of our existence? How can you come up with such an insipid idea, Resolve? How can integrity possibly compare in importance to the quality of our existence?
Questioned Resident Candid.
If it comes to integrity over quality of existence, it is integrity that will determine the outcome of that existence.
What rewards could there possibly be for being so stupid as to value integrity over the quality of our existence during a crisis like this? It is so annoying. When someone reads those plaques, it's like they drink some sort of poison. All they think about is morality and virtue, like that has anything to do with our present situation.
It has everything to do with our position.
Resident Resolve replied.
Why were we attacked in the first place? What is it about this castle and its inspectors that provoked the attack? Integrity is at the very heart of the matter. It is a threat to Pernicious, and destroying our integrity is, among other things, a possible motive for his attack. The question is, will we have integrity under pressure, or will we give it up without a fight? We can't hold out without the king. If there is an army outside and if we allow Pernicious in without a fight, this would be admitting that we do not have any integrity. This would make his victory perfect. An even greater victory for the enemy would be our thinking that we possessed integrity without being given it, and that we were not dependent on the capital city for this valuable wear.
But who is to say that except for you and a few others in this castle, anyone has integrity or needs it?
Replied Resident Candid while rubbing his hands together again.
If you judge integrity by the number of those who trust the king versus those of us who do not, this castle does not have any integrity at all, since you who favor the king are outnumbered by those of us who do not. Sure, integrity would be a wonderful commodity, but we don't possess it, and in a crisis like this, it is a luxury that is neither relevant nor needed.
I have had the opportunity of frequenting numerous castles. It is not an illusion that the wear of integrity is desired by some of the residents in this castle,
replied Alien Seal.
What did he say?
Resident Leary asked.
He said that he observed that integrity was something that was desired in this castle.
I can't believe it. Is this an alien who is giving an opinion?
Asked Resident Rye incredulously.
If it were up to me, I would make sure that only residents frequented the grounds of Finite Castle.
They are here because of cautious and perceived assent,
returned Resident Resolve.
We are getting off the subject again,
replied Resident Leary, shaking his head.
And just what is the point if you're so interested? My point being,
replied Resident Leary between biting his fingernails,
is that we should come to an agreement regarding the king. I don't really favor the king, nor do I favor letting in Pernicious before we give him a fight, if indeed there is an army outside. Here is a word for us to consider,
replied Resident Rye.
Freedom. Will we really have it if we seek rescue?
It is either the king or pernicious,
replied Resident Candid.
In any case, we were looking at preservation, and the question is the quality of that existence. Which of these two options will give, or rather provide, better quality?
I recall Resident Rye's comment as making a lot of sense.
Resident Averse replied immediately.
Freedom is something to consider.
It is not like we would not have any freedom when the king rescued us,
replied Resident Resolve.
Oh, certainly not.
Agreed Resident Averse.
The problem would be of what was expected of us. You seriously can't believe that the king would accept us without expecting something first, do you?
Of course I do.
Resident Resolve said in a prompt reply.
That is what the trust aspect is all about.
Yet, as to trust,
Resident Leary ventured hesitantly.
it is hard to trust. I am not sure that the obligations, or rather rules of the king are anything to be really worried about compared to the misery of being under pernicious accuser. The thing is, it is trusting that is so hard. Are you kidding?
Asked Resident Rye.
It is the rules that have got my bee in a net.
Then we have to determine whether living up to those rules is worth being rescued,
replied Resident Averse.
Simply resisting Pernicious Accuser to the end will not solve our dilemma by itself. The fact is that in the long run, it will just not work. If we are determined to resist the enemy without any help from Theopolis, we are by default relying on ourselves instead of the king. This is what the enemy wants. Our resistance means nothing without trust, without faith. Without trust, we cannot hope for rescue from Theopolis. We have to recognize where the help is coming from and ask for it.
We know you have the right to trust the king, but what gives you the right to tell us that we need to do so as well? Why should we trust him?
Finished Resident Rye.
What do you have to trust in?
Asked Resident Resolve.
If not the king, what gives you calm in the face of this attack of temptation? What keeps the enemy at bay?
Once again, if there is an army outside this wall, then this wall of our willpower,
replied Resident Candid, shooting a glance of disdain at Resident Resolve.
But does that really solve the problem? Will the law of averages always be in our favor? If we continually rely on ourselves, can we be sure that we will never be defeated?
Thursday, 9:45 p.m. The north wall of Victor Castle. Alien Kasha stood next to Head Inspector Noble, looking at his home, Finite Castle, which was besieged by the enemy.
It is amazing that you can be here and remain calm, though your castle is under attack.
Well, Head Inspector Noble, I did not imagine that 10 minutes after I left Finite Castle that there would be an attack, but that is the way of surprise attacks from the enemy. If I had known, I would never have left when I did. Not a half an hour before that, I had named a resident who was partial to the king as acting head inspector. He is very stable-minded and will probably replace me when the time comes.
Well, Cautious, I would imagine that event is a ways off.
Well, it will come at some point. I have requested the wares of wisdom for years. Not that I am taking any credit for that, but by the grace of the king, I believe that Finite Castle will be in good hands, though I still have some unanswered questions.
Well, don't think that I don't enjoy your company. But there are some errands as head inspector which I have to attend to. As head inspector, you can probably relate.
Certainly, Head Inspector Noble. I completely understand. I will probably observe Finite Castle from this wall for a while. I must say that I am really enjoying this breeze.
Yes, it was the strangest thing. Not too long into the attack which befell us, this breeze began, and we were at a loss to account for it. But we really like it too.
Well, you are busy, Head Inspector Noble, so I will see you later.
Yes, well, see you later, Alien Cautious.
Head Inspector Noble went down the stairs until he met Resident Alert.
Hello, Resident Alert. I am going to send another communication to the king regarding Finite Castle. Please have the prevailing voices meet me right below the room of plaques in the Great Tower in about 20 minutes.
About 10 minutes later, he was in the Great Tower with a feather in his hand and parchment on his desk.
To save your king in Theopolis and King Sovereign. From Head Inspector Noble of Victor Castle in the land of castles. Dear King and friend, hallowed is your name. We send our salutations to you. I write on behalf of Finite Castle, which, as you know, is a neighbor to your beloved and humble subject Victor Castle. I believe that they are having a tough time in this attack by the enemy. It is a tragedy for this castle, which shows signs of being partial to you, to fall into the clutches of the enemy. Once again, I make this official plea that you would move on behalf of Finite Castle. I know that you will not send armies of rescue until they themselves have requested this from you. As being more aware than I as to the particulars of this situation with Finite Castle, you know that this castle may possibly come to you with a plea for deliverance. But I ask, dear King, that something may be done to speed up or enable this decision. I know you love your subject Finite Castle, and I request yet again, in your name, that something more may be done to cause them to become not only your subject, but your beloved and faithful ally. Thank you for receiving this note. Thank you, dear King, for your time. I remain your devoted ally and friend, Head Inspector Noble. There, it is done, and as soon as it is signed, it will go on its way to Theopolis.
Getting up, he surveyed the communication. Deep in thought, he took comfort in the inspired promise.
I am the light of the world. SoulCastle, who follows me, shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life.
Friday, 4 a.m. The Gatehouse of Touch in Finite Castle. Artifice continued to lurk in the shadows. He was observing the conversation in the courtyard square when he saw the door of the great tower open. When he saw who opened the door, he froze. Lord Mysterious, who had just exited the door, did not head in the direction of the marble square, as Artifice had expected, but instead headed in the direction of the Gate of Touch. Artifice froze again, realizing where Lord Mysterious was going. All he could do was hope that Ploy would perform his task. He then decided to take matters into his own hands. Lord Mysterious headed towards the gate and Tower of Touch. Ploy was hidden in some shadows nearby and watching Resident Aspire from a distance. When he saw Lord Mysterious coming, he started with surprise and dropped a cup in his hands, for he knew exactly who Lord Mysterious was. Wasting no time, he ducked and fled the area as fast as he could. As he rounded a small tower, someone caught him by the throat and held him silently against a wall.
What is wrong with you?
Demanded Artifice in a hiss. It is Lord Mysterious, replied Ploy, trembling. Lord Mysterious is in this castle.
I know that. I know you are afraid, and so am I, but you must not let Resident Aspire leave your sight. Go back and watch from a distance. We may yet be able to salvage the situation we are in, but not if you go running off to who knows where. What if you had been seen by a resident instead of me?
I would be able to breathe easier, that's for sure. With that, Artemis slowly released his grip.
I will go back, and I will stay in sight within Resident Aspire, but I also stay as far away from Lord Mysterious as possible.
Releasing his grip, Artemis stepped back.
Good. I am going to alert guys. Don't let that resident out of your sight. Good luck.
Good luck.
Ploy said, still shaky after Artemis had headed out of earshot. Meanwhile, Lord Mysterious was walking up the stone steps of the wall towards Resident Aspire. Alien Zeal was halfway up and on hand to defend Resident Aspire if need be. When he saw Lord Mysterious, he came to attention and bowed low.
Lord Mysterious, it is a pleasure to see you here.
Thank you. It is the second time within a month I have run into you within the besieged castle. I am happy to be here. I'm on an errand to help Resident Aspire. He will not be on guard duty too much longer, Emissary Zeal. I don't think you need to be cautioned to follow him when he leaves.
I agree, Lord Mysterious. I will make sure he is safe.
Resident Aspire was getting tired. He did not suspect that guard duty would be this long. He stepped out of the tower and looked up into the night sky while shielding his eyes from the pelting drops of rain. The rain continued its downpour as it had for hours, and occasional lightning could be seen now and then in the distance. There was no wind, but only a steady torrent of rain from the dark clouds. Suddenly, Resident Aspire noticed that there seemed to be a breeze about, at which time he heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Turning around, he saw someone dressed all in white ascending the top of the stairs. As the person drew nearer, the breeze strengthened into a light wind, which then increased to a gentle gale as the stranger approached. There seemed to be an aura of light collecting around the person whom Resident Aspire had never seen before, and he began to wonder where the breeze had suddenly come from. The stranger's flowing garments were animated in the whirlwind that surrounded him, and the persona of the person exuded royalty and dignity of the noblest sort. The wind was strong now, even though there had not been a whiff of wind for hours, despite the rain. Resident Aspire suddenly felt the hair on his scalp rise, and he felt goosebumps on his arms. He looked at the person. Suddenly his eyes widened and he fell to his knees in deep reverence.
Resident Aspire, please rise.
Aspire arose and looked at Lord Mysterious, too surprised to speak at first.
I know that you often study the plaques. You are beloved by the king. He sees your devotion and he values your friendship.
Thank you, Lord Mysterious. I've found that nothing can replace it.
You will be a leader in this castle one day, I am sure. The king is looking for loyal and wise residents who have taken the time to understand him through the plaques.
Thank you, Lord Mysterious. He will have a lot to teach me before I'm ready.
He will be patient and understanding with you. Reading the plaques has given you an edge many others do not have, which they might have if they had read the plaques.
A few moments ago, I wished that I was reading them.
Where are the plaques in your castle located?
Resident Aspire was taken back. Why did Lord Mysterious ask this question?
What do they look like?
Resident Aspire was surprised. He was sure that Lord Mysterious knew the answer to these questions, and he was confused. But Lord Mysterious looked serious. Leaning on the wall next to the square impression with his head tilted one side, he considered his reply.
Well, they are of burnished silver with inscriptions on them. There's black marble in the carved inscriptions. They're a foot long by 9 inches wide and half an inch thick. Oh, and they have crease in the margin on both front and the back.
I see. They are adorned well, but it is not their looks, but their use that is important, don't you think?
Well, yes, Lord Mysterious.
Keep thinking about the plaques. I will be going now. You are doing a good job, Resident Aspire. Keep it up.
Thank you for visiting me, Lord Mysterious. I won't forget what you have said.
He almost laughed, but sighed instead. What was the purpose of the visit? It was not a social call, for the advice Lord Mysterious had given seemed important, yet familiar. Could it be that Lord Mysterious was preparing him for something more? It occurred to him that there was the potential for him to become, one day, perhaps, the head inspector. If he did become so, he had every intention of using his rank to assist Finite Castle in becoming more partial to the king.
Why did Lord Mysterious visit me?
He asked himself. Lord Mysterious brought up the plaques in a way that confused him. As he thought more about it, he realized Alien Zeal had also spoken of the plaques in a way that was not casual. What was it about the plaques? Were they both hinting at the same thing? Lord Mysterious had asked him to describe the plaques, and he did. He glanced at the square impression as he leaned against the castle wall and considered the mystery. The grid pattern in the square impression seemed very familiar. Why did they have the same? And then it hit him.
How could I have been so blind? The plaques are the solution. The plaques. They have the same grid lines in the front and the back, just as these square impressions do.
For a few seconds, Resident Aspire looked ecstatic at what he had been led to discover. Then his expression of joy faded as a crease of concern wrinkled his brow.
These grid lines on the plaques seem to fit those on this wall here, but the plaques are so easy to lift.
He observed with a quiet sadness.
I could lift 10 of them using just one arm, but they are also the only thing which seems to fit these grid lines in the impressions on this wall here. So strange. The grid lines on the plaques are identical to the patterns on the wall. This must be meant for each other, but how can they possibly add strength to the wall since the plaques are no heavier than paperweights? There must be an answer somewhere, or else the grids on the plaques would not match the grids on these squarish impressions under my nose. What is the connection?
Resident Aspire wondered out loud. As his shift went on, he continued to think about the plaques on the wall. He wrestled with the issue, using every bit of his logic to try and solve the question.
If the plaques are the solution, then why are they so light? There's no sense in keeping this all to myself.
He thought out loud.
And if there is something to it, the sooner I bring it to the attention of others, the better. When is my shift going to end? How am I going to get a replacement? Surely someone could come along. Someone who might find a replacement for me.
Resident Aspire waited impatiently in the early morning hour. Some of the residents were in the courtyard square and in a wrestling match between ideas. Friday, 5 a.m. The Gatehouse of Touch. It had been about an hour since Lord Mysterious had been to see Resident Aspire. The rain had not stopped, but the thunder had. He was beginning to think no one would pass by due to the commotion which he could faintly hear coming from the courtyard square.
This is so important. I need to share this information. I can't just leave my post. I wish that someone would pass by.
Suddenly, as if in answer to his question, he spotted Junior Resident Astute coming around a corner down in the courtyard.
Hey, Astute, could you come up here, please?
Junior Resident Astute seemed reluctant, but did not say anything. He looked almost as if he was going to turn away, as if he had not heard. Then he looked both ways and sprinted quickly up the stairs. As he neared the top, Resident Aspire sighed with relief.
I feel nervous being up here.
He said, looking around in several directions.
You seem awfully excited,
Remarked Junior Resident Astute as he eyed Resident Aspire suspiciously.
A new development has taken place,
Replied Resident Aspire.
Do tell.
Replied Junior Resident Astute, who was still glancing around as he sat down.
Could you tell me where that sudden breeze came from? The residents I have asked have been tight-lipped about it. I felt this breeze in the tower, in the courtyard, and now up here.
Well, I think I know, but there's not time to explain it now. I need to get to the head inspector soon.
You need to get to Head Inspector Perceive.
Well, Astute, take a look at the wall here.
I can't say I've ever seen anything quite like that. Of course, I've never been up here except for late last night.
Junior Resident Astute replied.
These impressions, patterns sort of things, are all around on the castle walls, right over the wall supports.
Resident Aspire replied with a gesture at one of the squarish impressions not 2 feet away.
So?
Does the wall look like it will last a long time?
Certainly not.
Junior Resident Astute commented.
Makes me uneasy. All that the residents are doing, the ones who are not on guard duty, that is, are hanging around the fountain arguing about what to do next.
I do believe that the plaques will fit right in here.
Resident Aspire replied as he motioned to the square indention on the top of the castle wall.
Wait a minute. I think you're right.
Junior Resident Astute replied, his expression showing interest.
The grid lines are the same on the plaques and on these squarish-looking things. Hold on a second.
Junior Resident Astute replied with a doubting tone in his voice.
Those plaques are so light that they would not support anything.
I thought of that also.
Resident Aspire commiserated.
But there's nothing else that I know of that has great lines which might fit the great lines on these walls. The king made the plaques, and he made the wall too. He does not make something for nothing. We won't lose anything by putting it in this impression to see what will happen. The wall will not hold indefinitely, and we've got to try something.
I see your point.
Junior Resident Astute replied with a nod.
What I was hoping was if you could get a replacement for me so I can bring this suggestion to the courtyard square sooner rather than later.
They do have the same grids.
Repeated Junior Resident Astute, nodding in amazement.
That is just the thing. When Inspector Resolve and Perceive hear this, they will know what to do.
Well, sure, I will look for a replacement. It may take a while, though.
Make sure you do not ask residents, Rai or Candid. They will only ask why you're getting into the affairs of full residents, and that will waste time.
At that point, Astute sped off down the stairs looking for someone. Aspire continued pacing and jotting down notes. He observed the enemy as they hammered away at the wall. After 10 minutes, he heard footsteps coming up the stairs.
Inspector Presume.
Resident Aspire said as he bowed to his superior. Hello, Aspire. Good job guarding your first full night faithfully.
Thank you, Inspector.
Oh, no thanks are needed. However, as I exited the great tower, I was almost run over by young Astute. He tells me you have made an important discovery. I don't know you that well, but Head Inspector Cautious trusted you, and that's good enough for me.
Well, I had some help making the discovery, but I am of the opinion that the sooner I get to the courtyard square and present what I know, the better off the castle will be. I appreciate your confidence in me. Do you want to deliver the message? It is about the plaques and the wall.
Well, Resident Aspire, since you have figured this out, it would be unkind of me to leave you here and take your discovery to the Marble Square.
Thank you, Inspector Presume. I did not want to be assuming, but I was hoping you would say that.
Well, if you got a theory that's worth checking out, then there's no point in keeping you here when you've got tracks to make.
Well, with that, I will be headed to the Marble Square. Thank you again, Inspector Presume, for leaving me.
You are welcome, Resident Aspire. With that, Resident Aspire headed in the direction of the courtyard square. The rain had picked up and the wind began to blow as thunder could again be heard as it came closer to the castle. Resident Aspire proceeded to pass between a tower and the wall. Hiding on the other side of the tower, Ploy put on his mask as he waited for Aspire to approach.
Come on now, Resident Aspire. You don't want to go around telling tales about the plaques now, do you?
Ploy said, half under his breath after he had unsheathed his sword.
I need to acquaint you with the flat side of my blade. Then you and I can relax somewhere alone.
Resident Aspire did not know that following silently and closely behind Ploy, Alien Zeal had also unsheathed his sword and held it in a ready position. In the distance, the shadow of the Tower of Taste hid two eyes that were silently watching all three figures.